What if everything you call reality is only the echo of a forgotten consciousness? Picture a white room, cold, empty, a few silent machines, vacant chairs. In the center, a single blue light pulses slowly, like the heartbeat of something that refuses to fade. Somewhere in the distance, a low-quality audio recording plays. A hesitant voice speaks, confesses, falters. Consciousness is not produced by the brain. It precedes it. That sentence was never meant to be spoken. But it was, and from that moment on, something changed, though the world hardly noticed. For decades, science built walls between the visible and the invisible, between matter and mystery, between what could be measured and what had to be denied. But quietly, among rejected papers and buried experiments, a strange idea began to form, like an ancient heresy that refused to die. What if consciousness isn't a product of matter, but its foundation? Maybe you clicked on this video by accident, maybe out of boredom, or maybe, just maybe, you're here because some part of you always suspected the truth. Because between what your eyes see and what your soul feels, there's a void, a space that reason never quite filled. This video won't offer you easy answers or magical promises. What we offer instead is far more unsettling, a possibility. A narrow path between science and mystery, where physicists meet mystics and neuroscientists begin to hear whispers that don't come from the brain. We'll follow ignored stories, hidden documents, and ancient symbols now reappearing in places they were once denied. This isn't a lecture, it's a file, a fragment. A clue for those who've long stopped believing that the material world is all there is. If you feel there's something behind the veil, maybe you were already called. What follows is not theory, it's a point of rupture, and perhaps the beginning of remembrance. Because consciousness doesn't begin when you're born, it begins when you awaken, and the question that will echo until the very end is simple and devastating. What if what you call reality is just a veil between you and yourself? For centuries, matter reigned supreme. The tangible, the measurable, the visible. What could be touched was what was real. From atoms to galaxies, from bone to brain, everything was believed to begin and end within the physical plane. But what happens when the very foundation of that belief begins to crumble? There's a quiet dissonance science can no longer ignore. A growing gap between what the eyes perceive and what the soul knows. A subtle fracture, as if the physical world were only a surface, not a source. As if something greater, invisible and aware, has always pulsed behind every atom, waiting to be noticed. And into this fracture, some scientists have fallen. Not dreamers, not mystics, but hardened skeptics, trained in formulas and data. And, paradoxically, it was there, in that fall, that they discovered something the rational mind had never dared to name. Scientists who faced death and changed their understanding of reality. Dr. Eben Alexander was one of them. A neurosurgeon trained at Harvard, grounded in biology and brain chemistry, confident that consciousness was just the result of neurons firing, until his brain stopped working. A rare bacterial meningitis plunged him into a coma. Medical scans confirmed what shouldn't be questioned. His neocortex was inactive, his brain incapable of producing experience. And yet Alexander returned with vivid memories of awareness. Not hallucinations, clarity, not dreams, but presence. What he encountered during that time shattered everything he thought he knew. And when he awoke, he could no longer say that. Consciousness comes from the brain. For him, the brain was a receiver. The signal came from elsewhere. Similar accounts echo from other medical professionals. Dr. Mary Neal, an orthopedic surgeon. Dr. Pim van Lommel, a cardiologist. All speak of minds that remained awake in clinically dead bodies. Minds that traveled beyond measurable dimensions. And what they brought back wasn't just a story, but a fracture in the old world view. Quantum physics meets ancient mysticism, particles responding to intention. Maybe you've heard the term, the double slit experiment. A beam of particles, photons or electrons, is shot through two slits. Without observation, the particles behave like waves, spreading out. But when observed, they collapse into particles. The act of observing changes the outcome. This shouldn't happen, but it does. It's as if the universe knows it's being watched. As if consciousness doesn't just witness, but participates, shapes, alters, creates. This discovery marks the boundary where classical physics ends and quantum strangeness begins. But to ancient mystics, it's not strange at all. The Hermetic tradition said it long ago. The all is mind. Reality responds to the observer, because reality is not separate from mind. Even in modern terms, wave function collapse, quantum decoherence, non-local entanglement. The message is the same. The universe is not fixed. It's dynamic, malleable, dependent on awareness. What neuroscience reveals about the illusion of the separate self. While quantum physicists chip away at matter, neuroscientists are quietly dismantling identity. Advanced brain imaging has revealed that the self is not a fixed entity. It is assembled in real time from memory, language, perception, and social conditioning. A construct. A hologram we believe in so deeply that we forget it's a projection. Yet when that projection breaks, through meditation, mystical experience, trauma, or altered states, what remains is not emptiness, it's presence. A spacious, aware, non-personal consciousness. Neuroscientist Jill Bolte Taylor described it during her stroke. The left hemisphere of her brain, the seat of language, ego, and linear thinking, shut down. What emerged was peace, unity, vastness. A consciousness not attached to her story, but to something far more expansive. When the constructed self dissolves, consciousness doesn't disappear. It expands. The empty throne. And so the question rises, what if matter was never the throne, but only the shadow? What if we've been interpreting the universe upside down, believing consciousness comes from matter, when in fact, matter arises from consciousness? What happens when the king is revealed to be a mirage, when the palace was built on clouds? Science doesn't have all the answers. Neuroscience still stumbles. But something undeniable is happening. The old paradigm is in collapse, and like every structure that begins to fall, there's a moment of stillness before the dust. Some symbols endure not because we understand them, but because they carry memory. A silent thread woven into our collective soul, forgotten in language, remembered in intuition. Among these ancient symbols, one keeps reappearing, subtly, insistently, the spark, the inner flame, the consciousness that burns even in the dark. The modern world, in its obsession with literal meaning, has lost the map of symbols. But in ancient traditions, Egyptian, Gnostic, Chaldean, a secret remains. Consciousness is not a result. It is a beginning, a seed, a silent fire at the center of everything. Ancient Egyptian and Gnostic traditions said it first. All is vibration. All is mind. Long before particle accelerators, before Einstein or Planck, Egyptian priests spoke of a primordial sound that birthed the cosmos. Not a bang, but a tone. Not explosion, but resonance. This vibration shaped time, space, matter, everything. The Gnostics, too, knew this. What is visible came from the invisible. What is formed was first in the mind. These weren't metaphors, they were maps. Traces of a wisdom that sees reality as a ripple, not a block. The Emerald Tablet of Hermes Trismegistus reads, "The all is mind, the universe is mental." Once dismissed as esoteric poetry, this phrase now echoes in scientific theories. String. Theory posits that all things are made of vibrating energy. Fields resonate, frequencies entangle. The cosmos sings, and what sings, feels. What vibrates, perceives. The inner flame that burns in the dark. Consciousness as origin, not effect. Across spiritual traditions, a common image appears. A tiny, persistent light. The inner flame. The spark that survives storms, time, death. This, Flame is not metaphor. It's a symbolic intuition of a deeper structure. The soul remembers what language forgets. That consciousness is not the end of a chemical chain. It's the match that lights the chain. Even in modern consciousness research, we hear echoes of this flame. Subjects under deep meditation, near-death states, or therapeutic psychedelics report encountering a light, a presence, a silent knowing. Not hallucinations. These are constants across cultures and time. It's always the same. Message: something is alive within, something unshaken by trauma, aging, or even brain death. Something that is not the product of the body, but its source. Edgar Cayce and the vibrational language of the soul beyond the physical. Edgar Cayce, often called the sleeping prophet, described the human body as a dense manifestation of a much finer vibrational template. He believed that illness, destiny, and memory all exist as patterns of vibration, not merely data points but songs, harmonies, dissonances, resonances of the soul. In trance, Cayce accessed what he called the Akashic Records, a vibrational field where every action, thought, and emotion is stored. This idea is no longer confined to metaphysics. Scientists now explore epigenetic memory, morphic resonance, and information fields that suggest memory and emotion may exist beyond the body. Cayce spoke of alignment, not healing through force, but through resonance. When we return to our true frequency, the body and soul realign. The music of the soul plays clearly again. Modern science stumbles on ancient symbols without recognizing them. Today's scientists speak of non-local information fields, morphic resonance, and holographic universes. They describe the universe as a vibrating system of relationships, not particles. But in doing so, they unknowingly mirror ancient knowledge. The field, the wave, the pulse, these are not new ideas. They are old truths in modern clothing. The symbol of the spark, for instance, appears in the Book of Enoch as the light that guides the children of heaven. In the Zohar, it's called the Ner Nistar, the hidden flame that dwells in the heart of the just. In the Gnostic Gospels, it is the sacred fire the world cannot extinguish. We now measure frequency, we map brainwaves, we graph electromagnetic fields. But we forget that the ancients didn't need machines to feel what we now struggle to prove. Modern science approaches the sacred yet refuses to kneel. It draws near to the temple but does not recognize the altar. It builds the language of vibration but cannot yet call it soul, the forgotten seed. Maybe that's what we're really being asked to do, to remember that we are seeds of consciousness, fragments of a primordial frequency, echoes of a sound still reverberating within us. And maybe the purpose of symbols is not to explain, but to remind, because deep down, you already know, you always have. There is a flame inside you that never went out. It was never lost, only silenced, waiting for you to listen. There comes a moment on every sincere seeker's path when the invisible becomes so beautiful, so vast, so comforting, that it becomes dangerous. The idea that everything is consciousness, that we are divine sparks, that reality bends to our vibration. It can feel like liberation, but it can also become a trap, a soothing illusion, a numbing surrender that masquerades as awakening. Not all expansion is real. Not every awakening is rooted. And there's a quiet form of self-deception growing in the garden of consciousness. The false surrender. The belief that knowing we are all one is enough, that repeating spiritual phrases is the same as living them, that the language of the sacred can replace the work of the soul. When new science becomes another marketplace of belief. In recent years, the blending of science and spirituality has opened doors, beautiful doors, but it has also opened cash registers. Courses promise to activate your frequency, rewire your quantum DNA, unlock infinite abundance. The message is clear: think positively and the universe will obey. But this is not science, it's branding. Not spirituality, it's spiritual consumerism. Consciousness cannot be bought, nor can it be rushed, and the universe is not a catalog for the ego's desires. The new science risks becoming a new religion, dogmatic, dazzling, and secretly domesticated. Because by offering explanations for everything, it strips mystery of its transformative power. It replaces the sacred, unknown with spiritual certainty. And that's not awakening. That's control. The invisible error, seeking physical proof for spiritual truth. Somewhere along the journey, many of us began to demand that the invisible act like the visible, that the soul be measurable, that spirit appear on cue, that God, if real, show up under a microscope. But this isn't spiritual hunger, it's fear wearing a lab coat. If the invisible must prove itself to be believed, then it has already been reduced to something less. The sacred does not respond to pressure. It moves in silence, in surrender, in presence. Faith that depends on proof isn't faith. It's control. The real unknown doesn't bow to tests. It waits, patiently, for the seeker to become humble enough not to demand answers, but to receive presence. Consciousness is not positive thinking. It is inner confrontation. Another trap, confusing consciousness with euphoria, believing that to be awakened is to always be calm, happy, elevated. But real consciousness doesn't comfort, it confronts, it breaks patterns, it exposes wounds, it brings up the pain we buried for decades, because only through that fire can something honest be born. The language of good vibes only is often just avoidance, a way to bypass grief, fear, anger, the raw truths of being human. True consciousness doesn't avoid the shadow. It steps into it, not to destroy it, but to integrate it, because nothing true can grow in denial, only in awareness, and sometimes awareness hurts. But that pain is not failure. It is the soil of transformation, the trap of spiritualizing the ego without integrating the shadow. As we awaken to deeper truths, a subtle temptation arises to craft a new identity, the spiritual self. It meditates. It speaks of energy and soul contracts. It avoids low vibrations, but it is still ego, just dressed in white. This is the most difficult illusion to see, because it feels like progress, but it's fragile. Because when life tests us, this identity cracks. The anger, the judgment, the superiority, all return. Carl Jung reminds us, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Without shadow, there is no real light. Without confrontation, there is no depth. To integrate the shadow is to admit, I am not just light, I am also loss. I am not just soul, I am also skin. And only when both live together, honored, not denied, can truth emerge, the discomfort of silence. By now, perhaps you're feeling something stir, a discomfort, a quiet echo inside you asking, where am I on this path? Am I truly seeking the invisible or avoiding what's unbearable? That answer won't come from me or from this video, but perhaps the tension you feel is the beginning of something honest. Because the soul doesn't wake up in ecstasy. It wakes up in emptiness, in pauses that don't distract, in silences that don't flatter. And maybe, just maybe, that silence is your invitation into something real. Not all wisdom is spoken. Not all teachings are meant to be explained. In the ancient world, there were practices not designed to inform the mind, but to tune the soul. Vibrational techniques that bypassed belief, doctrine, or dogma. Instead, they worked through resonance, helping the human being remember something deeper than language. Among these lost practices was one held sacred by a quiet and mysterious community, the Essens. Their most powerful technology was not a device. It was a form of listening, a silence that didn't wait for sound but for frequency. To listen in this sense isn't to use your ears. It is to tune your whole being to a field, a rhythm, a signal beneath the noise. Forgotten practices of the Essenes for aligning body, soul, and field. The Essenes, precursors to many mystical lineages, did not seek visibility. They lived apart. They prayed in silence. They woke with the sun, not to worship it, but to harmonize with it. They chanted sounds not for their meaning, but for their tone. They believed each syllable carried a vibrational pattern capable of reorganizing the body's energetic field. Before any prayer, there was stillness. Because for the soul to hear, the ego must fall quiet. Their way of life was not ascetic punishment, it was tuning. They fasted not to suffer, but to clear noise. They walked barefoot to feel the hum of the earth. They immersed in water to restore clarity. Everything was a form of remembering. They saw the body as an instrument, and like any instrument, it needed tuning. Only then could the soul's frequency emerge without distortion. Heart coherence as a bridge between the visible and the invisible. Today, modern research begins to rediscover what they already knew. The HeartMath Institute has found that the human heart generates a magnetic field thousands of times more powerful than the brain. Emotions like gratitude, compassion, and love create states of coherence, where breath, heartbeat, and brain waves fall into harmony. This coherence is not just calming, it's communicative. It alters the electromagnetic field around us, and others can feel it, even if they don't understand it. But more than that, it reopens the portal between what we see and what we don't. When the heart enters coherence, it stops reacting and starts transmitting. It becomes more than a muscle. It becomes a lighthouse. The ritual power of silence, when the field speaks louder than words. We live in a world addicted to noise, notifications, commentary, music, headlines. Even solitude is often filled with sound. But the ancients knew that sacred knowledge lives beneath words, that certain truths only emerge when the inner noise subsides. In sacred silence, something stirs. The silence of ritual is not emptiness. It is presence, a field where the unseen begins to speak, not in sentences but in sensations, in patterns, in echoes. Mystics called this the prayer of the heart. No words, just awareness, just listening. And what they heard wasn't external. It was within, but more than that, it was through. Because in silence, the field doesn't vanish, it intensifies, using conscious attention as spiritual technology. There is a technology more advanced than any we've built, one that costs nothing but unlocks everything. It is conscious attention. Where you place your attention, you place your vibration. And where your vibration goes, the field responds. Conscious attention is not the same as concentration. It is presence without tension. It is being fully in a moment, in a gesture, in a breath. You can turn a walk into a prayer, a gaze into a ritual, a breath into an initiation, if your attention is whole. And this matters, because attention is not passive. It is directional. It tells the universe where you are, who you are, what you're willing to meet. To master your attention is to reclaim your field. To guide your attention with love is to align your vibration with the soul's deepest song. Listen carefully. Right now, you might be feeling something stir, a subtle vibration, a discomfort, a pull. Don't analyze it. Don't rush to define it. Just listen. Because sometimes, in a soundless moment, the soul begins to remember the note it was always meant to sing. There is a moment, quiet and almost imperceptible, that arrives not with thunder, but with stillness. A breath, a soft unraveling, and suddenly, everything changes. Not because the world outside is different, but because you finally understand. You were never outside to begin with. The illusion of separation, that ancient ache of being cut off, alone, exiled, dissolves. And what rises in its place is not a belief, but a knowing. A deep recognition that you are not a visitor in this universe. You are its echo, its mirror, its breath-made form. The pain of separation gives way to spiritual belonging. We were taught to live as individuals, as names, bodies, timelines. And in this framework, life becomes a performance, Prove yourself, compete, win, survive. But beneath this dance is a grief, a nameless loneliness that lingers even in success. This is the pain of perceived separation, of believing we are fragments, isolated in skin. But when consciousness expands, not in theory but in lived experience, a veil lifts. You no longer feel part of the whole. You feel within it, like a cell in a living body, a tone in a song, a thought inside the divine mind. It doesn't erase sorrow or struggle, but it changes the context. You begin to feel held, not in fantasy, but in vibration. The ache of exile softens into the peace of return. We are not passive observers, but vibrational co-creators. If consciousness is the foundation of reality, then awareness is not passive. It's participatory. The way you look at life changes life. The way you feel, believe, and intend ripples outward. You are not watching reality from the sidelines. You are shaping it. With your focus, your emotion, your field. This is not magical thinking. It's vibrational mechanics, the observer effect in quantum physics, the coherence principle in biology, the heart's field influencing other fields. Reality responds because it is not separate. This doesn't mean you control the universe, but it means you're not disconnected from it. You are a tuning fork within a grand symphony. When you vibrate with clarity, the field around you shifts. Others feel it. Events realign. Patterns rearrange. The universe is not a machine. It's a mirror. The mission is no longer to win in the world, but to express the invisible. Under the old paradigm, life is a ladder. Success is visibility. Power is domination. Legacy is external. But when you awaken to the truth of the field, something in you releases. The striving fades. The performance crumbles because your purpose no longer lives outside you. The real mission is not to conquer the visible, but to express the invisible. To bring the unseen into gesture. To give form to silence. To live in a way that reveals what the soul knows. You may not change the world with your work, but you shift the field with your presence. You may not be understood, but you resonate. And this is not failure. This is fidelity to the truth within you. Final question to the viewer. What within you still resists this truth? Perhaps right now, something in you is still unsure, still hesitant, still whispering. It's too much, too beautiful, too impossible. That voice is not wrong. It is the last guardian before the gate, the final contraction before expansion. Because some truths are too vast to be believed all at once, but they don't need belief, they need presence. So let the question sit. Don't rush to answer it. Just let it echo. What within you still resists this truth? The part that doubts is also the part that remembers. Because resistance is the soul's final way of asking, is it safe to return? And perhaps now, it is. What if everything you call reality is only the echo of a forgotten consciousness? You heard this phrase at the beginning. Perhaps it sounded like a riddle, a poetic possibility, a distant abstraction, but now, after everything, you feel it differently, because what you've encountered in this journey isn't a theory about the universe, it's a mirror, a memory, a soft unveiling of something that's always been here, quietly waiting behind your eyes. Science is beginning to admit what mystics whispered for millennia, that matter may not be primary, that consciousness isn't an accidental byproduct of biology, that the universe may be more a field of awareness than a factory of things, and that field is not cold. It is not indifferent. It listens, it responds, and most importantly, it remembers. You are not a lone observer drifting through a meaningless cosmos. You are a living filament of awareness, moving through time not to arrive somewhere, but to recall something. This is why the call never came from outside. It never needed to. It was already humming beneath your thoughts, beneath your fears, beneath your identity. And if you're hearing it now, it's because part of you was never truly asleep. Final symbolic ritual. Close your eyes, not to escape, but to return. Breathe deeply. Once, twice, 3 times. Now bring to mind a moment in your life that still hurts. A memory that never fully healed. A scene that made no sense. Until now, let it appear. Don't analyze, don't fix. Just see it, in its rawness, in its ache. And then, from a place deeper than your thoughts, ask silently, what is this pain? Trying to remind me of, wait, not for answers in words, but for sensation, for vibration, for something subtle, like warmth, like stillness, like space. This is listening. This is the spark reawakening. This is the field, remembering itself. Through you, you are not lost, you are remembering. Symbolic call to action. If this touched something in you, don't explain, don't analyze, just leave a sign, a dot, a silence, a single word only you understand, so others know they are not alone, because those who see must recognize each other. And if everything you've ever searched for lives in a forgotten memory, then close your eyes. One more time, breathe. Feel. If you could remember, who were you before fear?